AMC stock right now is getting blasted on the news because of the CEO and CFO selling a lot of shares. All of a sudden, there seems to be a lot of negative sentiment around AMC, the insiders selling, and my take on that, as well as the overall fundamental picture of AMC and how it's changed since I last covered it when it was trading around $60. Since June, the stock has traded sideways or mostly trended downwards, and the news of the CEO selling more shares doesn't look great for the company. The CEO still owns around 100,000 shares, but if you compare that to the number of shares outstanding for the company, that's a very small percentage. But he does have incentives in order for the company to perform well because he can unlock more shares based on performance targets. My opinion when it comes to executive selling is that it can be for multiple reasons, and it's not always negative. When a CEO goes ahead and sells shares, it may have been planned a year ago because a lot of the time they get paid in stock. In order to live whatever lifestyle they are living, they need to convert that stock into cash, so they sell. The other reasons that could be seen as negative is when it's not pre-planned and the CEO or CFO executives have zero stake in the game. If all of a sudden you see them dumping all of their shares, then it might be an issue. I tend to put more emphasis on when an insider is buying a ton of shares, as there's usually only one reason they're doing that. They think the company is going to do well and the share price is going to appreciate. One thing you cannot deny about AMC is it definitely has a cult following when it comes to the stock, which is a little bit different than most stocks that have parabolic moves to the upside. When AMC was squeezing to the upside, it had a really good story of the small investor versus these hedge funds, and it was this battleground stock that didn't look at the fundamentals, and I think we can all agree that it was 100% moving on sentiment. What's interesting though is on the back end of things, the whole short squeeze story has dramatically changed ever since they increased the amount of outstanding shares in order to raise capital. You're talking about an increase from 100 million shares to over 500 million now. A story that I constantly see pushed by AMC influencers, I would say at this point, because there's people that create content only around AMC, is that another massive short squeeze is coming. Now, if you look at the data that's provided by something like Fintel and the massive increase in outstanding shares, the short interest percentage of a float has gone down dramatically versus the old days, where the number of shares short versus outstanding shares was a bigger percentage. With 500 million shares outstanding and a short interest of 83 million, I mean, you're talking about 16%, which is definitely a high percentage, but it isn't the fuel to create a mega short squeeze. I mean, you're talking about GameStop and AMC when they had percentages that were over 100% of the float, and that is the fuel that can really destroy shorts if that rocket gets ignited. If we take a quick look at the financials, while the company is improving versus 2020, the company is still losing money on an accounting side. The free cash flow is negative, so they are burning through cash on every single quarter, and until they really turn things around or change the trajectory of the company, it's not a great underlying business. The good news is they do have a longer runway because they have a decent amount of cash that they raised. The unfortunate side of that, though, is in order to raise that amount of cash, they had to increase the shares outstanding to around 500 million. I'm not shorting AMC because it's hard to predict if this thing is going to crash, the sentiment is going to hold, because there is an army of people willing to throw money at this thing. So as long as that stays strong, this thing can stay where it's at, or it could rally, which is why sentiment-driven investing is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's fantastic, other times it sucks when it turns against you. And the thing is, I used to sell puts in AMC because the sentiment was extremely strong, and I thought the sentiment would kind of hold the stock at a high level for a decent amount of time. At this point, it's still a higher IV, but if I look at something like the IVR around 15, it's on the lower side of its 52-week range, which means that I'm probably not going to play AMC any longer because it's less of an implied volatility play, and now you have to be correct on your timing as well as direction. It seems like there's two types of AMC investors right now: the people that got in early and they're still sleeping pretty because they're sitting on single-digit cost basis or lower teens, and they still have made money on the position, whereas you have the people that kind of got brought into this whole thing based on the story. It's fun to be part of a group and kind of take down the big guys. But the people that got in around 60, the one thing that I have to say is falling in love with the stock can be dangerous. If the thesis has changed or the narrative has changed, that's where sometimes it's better to cut losses. I'm not telling you what to do with your money or stocks or anything like that, but that is the one dangerous thing with these squeezes is it brings in people, especially when the people that are kind of pitching the stock promise even bigger returns in order to kind of pump their own stock.
Possible that AMC can reach anywhere from 100K a share to 500 or even $1 million a share.
If you follow my channel, you know I'm more of a fundamental guy and less about technicals and sentiment. In the long term, companies tend to trade down to a valuation that makes sense based on the fundamentals. And if you are an AMC stockholder, you should be paying attention more to how is the company turning around and generating actual free cash flow, how are they stopping the bleeding, how are they growing in the future, and should be less focused on people telling you that the stock is going to 10x without any reason other than it's going to short squeeze. If you did like the video, make sure to hit that like as well as consider subscribing to Make Sure Wolf, where we talk investing, stocks, anything to do with money. Thanks guys for watching and have a great day.